All right, hopefully everybody is in that can attend today. We're going to get the ball rolling here. We've got a very important topic to bring to you today, so I'm glad that you're here. Thank you and welcome. We're going to talk about fraud. We've got some statistics, details, some actual examples, like real life examples that we've worked through as a bank, and then we're going to teach you some ways to protect your business. Now, we do want this to be participative, so please use the chat feature at the top of your screen to ask questions. We'll be monitoring that chat stream and get your questions as soon as practical. And with that, my name is Neil Buchanan. I'm Senior Vice President here at Community State Bank. Been in banking for 27 years, most of which are on the cash management side. And with me today are Molly Krause and Laura Burnett Shoemaker.
Good afternoon. Thanks for joining us. I'm Molly Krause, and I've been in banking for almost 3 decades. I've spent the last 10 years here at Community State Bank in the cash management department.
And I'm Laura Burnett Shoemaker. I too have been in banking for approximately 30 years and a member of the cash management team at Community State Bank for the past 4. So again, we welcome everybody. We really thank you for being here today. We're going to get started. And we were really pleased when we saw the response that we had to the invitation that was sent out, because that shows us that you recognize how important this topic is and the importance of being prepared so that if something happens, you're prepared and can handle it. In today's world, unfortunately, we deal with fraud almost daily, and it really isn't a matter anymore of if fraud is going to happen, but when it's going to happen. So again, please throw those messages or questions that you have in the chat. We'll be happy to answer them along the way. And if we miss anything, we'll be sure to address it at the end of the presentation. So we're going to share with you today some statistics regarding how fraud is taking place. We're going to share some examples of incidences that we're aware of. And then most importantly, we're going to tell you some steps that you can take, things that you can do as soon as this presentation is completed, that you can put in place so that your accounts are protected. So much of our information is taken from the 2021 Payments Fraud and Control Survey Report. This is an annual report published by the Association for Financial Professionals. And this was, I believe, the 13th or 14th year that they did it. And there were 520 respondents. Out of those respondents, they represent a wide variety of organizations. It could be anything from commercial industrial, it could be real estate, retail, and then as well, it also represents various sizes. So somebody, a small individual business in a local community, all the way up to a chain across the nation. What they learned in the responses from these members was 385 of these organizations were targets of payment fraud in 2020. And what they learned from their feedback is that business email compromise is the primary source of payment fraud. So you're probably familiar with email compromises. This is the phishing and the spoofing that they're doing. And there are a couple of actual tactics that we're going to concentrate on. So one of them is CEO fraud. And CEO fraud is when somebody poses themselves as the CEO of the organization, and they reach out to an employee within that organization. This actually happened to us, and our CFO received an email message, and it appeared to be from our president, Scott. And in it, it was directing Peter to transfer money. And luckily, Peter was astute enough when he received that message. He reviewed it, and it just didn't seem right. He trusted his gut. It wasn't a way that Scott typically requested funds be transferred. He typically wouldn't do something like this. So we were fortunate in that he recognized that this seemed out of the norm. He reached out to Scott and was able to verify that no, he did not in fact initiate that email and no funds were sent. Another type of fraud is a false invoice scam. So there's many examples of that, and I'm actually going to turn this over to Neil, and he's going to share an instance that took place.
Right, so this one's actually kind of scary. The evolution of theft has really come a long, long ways. Bad guys are smart. They figure out our patterns, how we do business, and then capitalize on it. That's really their job, and they're good at it. How this happened is this is a 6-figure fraud. So over $100,000 was stolen from one of our customers, and here's how it happened. A bad guy sent a false link got clicked on, and right away, that bad guy got access to everything that happens on their computer. They recognized emails, invoices, common threads, and eventually got so ingrained in it and key logging and watching everything that this business was receiving an invoice from one of their vendors. Got this invoice. The bad guys grabbed the invoice out of email, stripped it out, replaced it with a mock one that said, hey, we need you to pay us with ACH now. We need you to pay us electronically. Here's our routing number and account number over at Wells Fargo. Submit the next invoice, this, again, six-figure dollar amount, to this banking information. And our customer went, okay, I guess. Well, we've been working with them for a long time. So they called the bank and said, we need ACH now. We need to be able to send money to our vendor with ACH. So we advised them, got them set up, got them all set, and they sent out this ACH. Thought everything was good until 2 weeks later, when their vendor called them and said, hey, you haven't paid us yet. Where's our money? And of course, our customer says, well, we did pay you. We sent the ACH just like you asked for. The vendor said, we didn't ask for an ACH. How did that happen? This false email that was put in there by the bad guys had an extra character in the email address. Most of us wouldn't really notice something like that, but anytime that there's something fishy, something odd, you should really pump the brakes and think about it a little further. Molly, you've got a little more on this topic?
Yeah, I think one of the most important takeaways in this is that there was a potential red flag, and that potential red flag was a change in how somebody was making their payment. This happens a lot, a change in how they're making their payment or a change to the account number and routing number. Anytime that happens, we tell you to do an out-of-band verification of that information. So what does that mean? It means that we're going to do the old-fashioned pick up the phone and get ears or eyes on whoever is requesting that change. So in this case, this customer actually did call the company that they were doing business with. They called the vendor they pay. They said, look, I got this invoice from you and I'm going to pay it. I just need to know, what type of account does it go into? They didn't go into specifics. They didn't say, hey, I got an email request from you stating that you want us to pay you through ACH now. It's very important that you verify whether it's a vendor or an employee making changes to their payroll information, that you talk with them and know for sure that, yes, this is the change that they are making. Verify that account number and routing number with them and make sure you know who you're talking to.
Now, one thing that makes us a little different is obviously we got the frantic call from our customer saying, I sent this money. They're saying it wasn't received. Is it gone? Is it all lost? We were able to recover about half of those stolen funds, which is remarkable considering that it was 2 weeks after the event. Typically, a bad guy clears out an account as soon as they possibly can. But we're able to get about half of it back. There's also a $25,000 insurance claim filed for this loss. But still, in the end, it's a significant loss to a small business. It could be quite damaging.
So we shared with you a little bit about how fraud is happening. Now we want to tell you where it's happening and where it is most prevalent. So in today's world, we're constantly encouraging people to use electronic payments, and fraud is happening there. But still, the number one area where fraud is taking place is with checks. So 66% of the respondents to this survey said that they had check fraud. So companies are intercepting, or individuals are intercepting checks in the mail. They're adjusting them. And again, we have another example that we think will better illustrate it. Neil, would you like to share that one too?
Yes, this is scary stuff. It's just plain old fashioned check fraud. This is like if you've seen the movie with Leonardo, The Catch Me If You Can. It's that, and it's still happening because it is so easy. It's quite simple. In this situation that I'm going to describe, one of our customers lost about $36,000. They figured out that something was wrong because they were reconciling their accounts a month and a half after the close of the month, which is not a best practice, obviously. You want to reconcile those accounts as fast as possible on a daily basis, really, just to recognize if anything looks weird. So they figured out, again, 6 weeks after the close of business for a month, that there were extra checks in their statement. They got suspicious, called the bank, said, what's going on here? We dug in, and sure enough, it was just old-fashioned check fraud. How does this happen? Checks are kind of scary. They're dangerous because on one piece of paper, it's the routing number and account number and how somebody signs and what the logo is in the upper left-hand corner. Every little detail about how to fake a check is literally on the check itself. So I don't know if you've heard of people digging through mailboxes, but that's not uncommon. Digging through dumpsters to find old checks that weren't destroyed properly, because that information could be the ticket to try to steal some money. We don't know exactly how it happens every time, but it's just about inevitable unless there really are good best practices in keeping checks secure. Molly will cover more on that later. In this situation, though, again, the bank does what we can to try to recover the money. And fortunately, we were able to recover of $36,000. We recovered $24,000 in this situation, which again is a miracle considering that those checks were out there for so long. And I believe that an insurance claim, a fraud insurance claim, was filed as well on that one.
Thank you. The next fraud is wire transfer fraud. And while it's second place, you can see there's a big difference at 39%. So wire transfer fraud takes place, again, with spoofing. They're using spoofing. They're sending an email and they're asking funds to be redirected. Maybe they've never asked you to wire funds before, or maybe they're saying our information has changed. We're banking at a new bank, or our account number has changed, and they're updating their account information. Again, you really want to reach out to the customer, like Molly was talking about before, and ask those specific questions to make sure that it is really your vendor, the person that you're working with, who is making these changes. ACH debit and credit fraud. ACH debit and credits, when we use that acronym, we're talking about the automated clearinghouse, and this is the movement of funds electronically. So direct deposit is an example of an ACH. When you're making your bill payments online, those are all ACH transactions. So ACH debit fraud happens when a thief is reaching into your account and they're debiting the funds out of your account. That's happening 34% of the time. And not as prevalent is the credit fraud. And that's, again, some of these examples that we've been sharing with you where you're being redirected and you're actually pushing the money out. You're sending money from your account and crediting the recipient. And that recipient, unfortunately, is a thief who has control of those funds now. As we take a look, I'm so sorry. As we move on to the next one, we go to credit and debit cards. And there's a little bit of good news here. So credit and debit cards, we've seen a decrease in that activity. And a lot of that can be attributed to the different type of functions that are in place now. Banks are using algorithms and they're monitoring a little bit more closely. It's done automatically, and your spending habits are being monitored more closely. So we know if something is out of the norm for you. And out of the norm can be the type of business that you're making a purchase at, or physical location. If your most recent activity has been in Wisconsin and all of a sudden you have debits posting from Florida, that's going to cause a red flag. You're going to be notified in some manner. Maybe the fraud area is going to give you a call, or you might receive a text. As long as you get that call, you approve that transaction or respond to the text, everything will move forward as planned. But it's when you don't respond or when you let them know that, no, this isn't me, that card gets shut down right away. And then you can, it'll be replaced and you don't have to worry about the transactions at that point. The chip technology is also something that has helped greatly decrease the activity between credit and debit cards. All right, so we're going to move on to multi-front attacks, and I'm going to have Neil take over from here and share information on that.
This is where it gets really scary. A multi-front attack is where, again, the bad guy gets into a system somehow, a malicious link or something that gets clicked on, and poof, bad guy has access to everything. Multi-front means that the hackers, the fraudsters, are using multiple ways to try to steal money from a business at the same time. It really does get overwhelming. And the situation that we worked through, information we believe was probably sold on the dark web. So sensitive information from our customer and their network. They actually dug in that deep, was supplied out there somewhere, because we're still getting checks from Texas. There's an advertisement in Texas for some reason saying, looking for mules, like looking for people that they could give a physical check to, take to a quick cashing place, have the funds come out of Community State Bank. The mule keeps a percentage. The actual bad guy receives the rest. So with that one, we had ACH fraud, we had check fraud, we still have check fraud. In that situation, usually we don't have to close an account because of a fraud incident, but it was so just ripe with many different types of fraud, we literally shut everything down. This actually does remind me of one of the questions that we got during registration is, if the checks are fraudulent, why does the business take the loss? It's a great question. With every fraud incident that we have for check fraud, that's one of the questions that comes up is, whose loss is it? Now, the banking industry has 24 hours. We only get 24 hours to recognize that a fraud happened, to be able to get the money back for sure. And how we get that money back is from the bank that first accepted the check. It's their liability to have those funds ready to give back to us for 24 hours. After that 24-hour window, the loss is the business that actually lost the money. How I liken it to is if tools are sitting in the back of a truck, those tools are somebody's assets. Those assets sitting loose in a truck get stolen, it's on the business. The business just lost their asset. Cash is one of your assets also. So losing that cash asset is just like losing the tools out of the truck. Now, fortunately, we do have a lot of ways, best practices and products for you to consider putting in place to try to prevent those losses. But that's really the key, is not letting it happen in the first place.
So let's talk a little bit about the cost. There is definitely potential loss of your funds. Fortunately, again, from the study, 23% of the respondents reported that they didn't have any loss. And then we can go to the high end, where only 9% reported losses of $2 million or more. Those examples we wanted to put in there so you have the information, but that most likely was a response from a large nationwide chain. But 30% of companies, the majority of them in the sampling, showed that they reported losses of $50,000 or less. So in the scheme of things, maybe that isn't horrible, but for a small company, that can really be devastating. So you want to think about, if you can afford to lose $50,000 just to have it disappear, and even if you're in a position where you can, is that where you would want your money to go? So definitely something we want to make sure you have practices that you can put in place to protect your funds, and we're going to be sharing information about that. In addition to the actual loss of funds out of the account are the costs to manage it and clean it up. There's time spent after a fraud takes place, maybe adjusting your accounts, opening new ones, notifying your vendors and the various organizations who you work with of your updated information. The cleanup, we recommend filing police reports, ordering new checks. All of that comes at additional funds out of your pocket. So now let us share with you some solutions. What can you do to protect your accounts? And what can you do to make sure that this doesn't happen to you? Or if it does, you're prepared and you don't suffer these losses. Molly, can you share some information with us?
Great, thanks, Laura. So I think we've made it pretty clear today that fraud is everywhere, and it's very costly, not just financially, but also of time to management. You're a business, and unfortunately, that makes you an automatic target. And as you know, fraudsters have a multitude of avenues to get at your account information and to abuse it. So how do you protect your business? What can you do? So we would just want to go through some tips and recommendations for you so that you're not just a sitting duck. You can be proactive and use tools that banks provide so that you can put up a strong defense against a potential fraudulent attack. So with that, the number one tool that we're going to recommend for you is online banking. If you're not using it today, I implore you to get signed up. And don't just sign up, but use it. Knowledge is power, and it is your first line of defense against fraud. Like Neil talked about in one of our examples, somebody was waiting until they got that account statement in the mail to reconcile their transactions and look at what was going on in their account. 24 hours? By the time you're getting that statement in the mail and looking at it, it's too late. We're not going to be able to recover those funds. So we recommend to start a healthy habit. Review your account on a daily basis. If you can't, make sure somebody within your organization can. If there is a transaction that you're looking at that you don't recognize, call the bank immediately. We love taking those phone calls and giving you more information to make sure that there's no fraud, because it costs you time and money. That costs us time and money too. So we'll never get mad at you for calling and looking in on a transaction. If the transaction's legitimate, great. But if it's a fraudulent attack, you've stopped it many times before that thief can ever take money from you. So in this day and age, we know it's not always practical to be in the office and to be in front of our computers and log in and look at our accounts. Especially for our small business owners, you wear many hats. You may be out of the office for a few days on a project doing other things. But there is one thing that I'm pretty sure everybody on this webinar today has attached to them at their hip, and that's their cell phone. So we highly recommend downloading your bank's mobile app. The information that you can find out through your mobile app is the same information you can find out by logging in online. You can even pull up an image of a check right through the mobile app. Again, if there's something there you don't recognize, give us a call immediately. How handy? The phone's right in your hand. If it's legitimate, great. But if it's not, again, you're going to stop that fraudster before they can take your money. Going right along with online banking and the mobile app are account alerts. Account alerts are very helpful in bringing your attention to the activity in your account, especially if it's unexpected. An alert can be about transactions that can come to you through an email or a text message. One of my favorite alerts to talk about is on your business savings accounts or business reserve accounts. These typically are accounts that don't have a lot of transactions. You're not looking at them a lot. So again, if there's fraudulent activity going on, you're not going to know, especially if you're not looking at it on a daily basis. If you set up a debit alert on that account, you're going to get a text or an email if something's coming out of that account. And if it's unexpected and you're getting a text that money's being moved from your reserve account or a business savings account, then you know something's up and you give the bank a call. Again, if it's legitimate, no harm, no foul. But if it's fraud, you've stopped them before they've taken your funds. Now, one of the questions that we did receive from one of our registrants was, what is the most secure and efficient way to pay another business? Now, it might surprise you when you hear us say that we're not going to recommend that sending a check is the most efficient and secure way of paying another business. We're going to tell you electronic payments. Become an ACH originator, send the payments electronically. As we've talked about, there's been a lot of check fraud. Checks are being stolen. They're being stolen from mailboxes. They're being stolen out of mail rooms. It used to be that when you gave a vendor or an employee a check, they were coming to the bank and depositing that check. The banks were now in charge of securing that information. We're audited. We've got to store that information and we have to store it securely. But now, because of the convenience of the mobile deposits, you're trusting your checks with whomever you're giving them out to. Whatever vendor or employee has that check is supposed to safeguard your information. So can you trust that they are securing that in a safe place and destroying it in a timely manner? Or is it sitting around on a desk somewhere? Is it sitting in someone's work van? Could it be in a glove compartment of an employee? Unfortunately, you no longer have control of that. But if you're sending that payment electronically, you're now in control and in charge of that financial information. So you're sending out the payment through a secure, encrypted highway of payments within the banking system. We have to have the encryption. We're audited on this. So it is the most efficient, secure, and I would argue least expensive way to pay employees and vendors, and that is electronically. The last tool that we want to talk to you about is called Positive Pay. There's both check and ACH Positive Pay. And the way the Positive Pay service works is that you tell the bank what services to expect. And if something comes in that you didn't tell us about, we're going to send you a warning. We're going to send you an email and we're going to say, hey, we've got this check coming in. You didn't tell us about it. Is it okay? It gives you the opportunity to review the check and click on yes, please pay this check. I just forgot to import the information, or no, don't pay that check. It's fraudulent. Return it. So when that check is presented to the bank, it's looking at 4 items that you've told us about. It's looking at the issue date of the check number, who that check is made payable, and the dollar amount. So if any of those 4 items don't match, it's going to put a pause on that payment for you to review. Same thing with ACH. If you're letting somebody that you do business with debit your account for an invoice, you're going to tell the system, okay, I work with this company. If this company takes money out of my account, it's okay. You can even set up parameters so that if the company is taking funds out of your account, you can set a limit. So let's say you pay We Energies and you let them automatically debit your account. You let our system know that this company is allowed to debit your account, but you know, my electric bill typically never goes over $500, so I'm going to set a $500 limit. Now, if it's winter time and you got the Christmas lights on and, you know, gas is more expensive now, and a bill comes presented to your account comes to $750, it's going to pause it. It's going to pause it because you told us that this company can deduct money from you, but only up to $500. So in that case, again, we're going to send you a little warning like, hey, this company that you do business with is taking funds out of your account, but it's over the threshold that you set. So it gives you the opportunity to review that payment. So again, that service is just yet another tool that's at your disposal so that you can help prevent fraudsters from taking funds out of your account. And so we shared with you today some things that you can do and put in place to help protect your funds. But also, we just want to point out that you really need to make sure that you know who you're doing business with. Do you trust them with your financial information? Have you met them? If not, have you Googled them? Have you done your research? Do you know who they are? Also, because you also hold account information for vendors, employees, make sure that you're securely storing their information. Once you're done with that information, make sure that you're shredding it. Take care of their information like you would take care of your own. As far as it comes on the internal side, internal theft, make sure that when and if possible, you're using dual control. If somebody is cutting checks, make sure somebody else is looking at them. If somebody is sending out the weekly payroll, have someone else approve it. And then last but not least, like we've said, probably about 10 to 20 times during this presentation, monitor your accounts daily. Take a few minutes, use the app, do what's convenient for you so that you know what's going on in your account, because again, that is your first and best defense against a fraudulent attack. So that's what we had to present to you today. We did receive some questions when people were registering. And one of the questions that we did have was, is there an increase in counterfeit cash being circulated? And I think, Neil, you have some information to share on this.
I do. Yes, that's on the increase as well. This, I don't know if you can see it very well, but this is $365. They were received in 6 separate transactions at different locations at Community State Bank from our retail customers. These are each fake. They mean nothing. We do send them into the Secret Service because they analyze it and check for fingerprints and such. But we're seeing an increase on that. Best ways to protect yourself from receiving this cash. And some of this stuff is pretty good. But take a good look at it, especially the larger bills. I mean, it's tough for a business to lose $100 thinking that they just received $100. But some of these say promotion picture use only. Some of the printing isn't quite right. I know it's tough to feel a bill when it's been through circulation a bunch, but there is a different feel to a dollar. And maybe an experienced clerk would recognize it right away, but some of your newer employees might not be able to identify very quickly if it's a fake dollar just based on the feel. But on Amazon, you can get a pen. There's a counterfeit detector pen that literally just make a little swipe on the bill. If that swipe is yellow, it's a legit currency. If it turns brown or black, it's not the right paper. And that's the way that we usually catch these. Our machines at the bank, they pick them out real easy too. They can detect counterfeit bills. But yes, they are on the rise. So thank you for the lead there, Molly. I'd like to present a couple quotes from our business customers that are using these products and are using the best practices. You can see that Chris Bauer over at Bauer Design is using the tools, and he sleeps better at night because of it. Next one is Gail Bentley at Union Grove High School. She is also a frequent user of tools. She's very aware of what's going on in the accounts, and she appreciates having these abilities in place to keep their accounts safe. And with that, we would welcome questions. I can see that our chat has not filled up with a bunch of questions, but we would love to hear from you. While you're figuring out what questions you'd like to ask, we do have a couple others that were kicked out to us upon registration. How to detect if an email is from the company that they say they're representing. I touched on it briefly, and it's so easy to miss though. Email addresses, if you just add an extra character to a long email extension, it's kind of hard to pick up. So take a good look at it. The other way that we detect false emails, and most people have received them by now, is maybe something's not quite right. Maybe a misspelling from somebody from another country that's just phishing. If they don't address you the way that you typically greet each other, in a B2B relationship, things like that should be a red flag. It should cause you just a moment to stop, and just as Molly explained, take it out of band. Get on the phone, actually contact them, send a text to verify that the email is actually what it represents. Another very good question. I'm going to let Laura and Molly handle this one. How often do you deal with fraud?
We deal with it almost daily. So something's coming up, whether it's a concern that there's a suspicious transaction, and we help do the research to discover that it's fine, maybe just something that you forgot about, but we do have fraud. It does seem to go in waves, but it seems like when it's prevalent, it really is prevalent. And I would say we have something come through on definitely a weekly basis, and in some cases, something new daily.
It does look like we do have another question in the chat, and I believe it has to do with mobile deposit through your phone. So on the business side, we do have a maximum check amount of $10,000 for a deposit, but there really is no minimum that you need to push through on your phone.
Just
good question. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, absolutely. As Molly was talking before, she shared, to make sure that that information is being safeguarded. So when you're doing your due diligence, not only when you're getting those requests to change where you're sending a wire transfer or new account information, when you're starting to do business with a vendor, you can, feel comfortable asking them questions about how do they, if you're mailing them checks, how do they negotiate that check? Are they bringing it to a bank? Or are they using the services of remote deposit capture or mobile banking? And if so, how are they safeguarding your information? Are they locking it in a stored place? Are a limited number of people allowed access to it? And then are they disposing of it by shredding or incinerating within 30 to 45 days? Those are all best practices that you want to make sure they're implementing to minimize the opportunity for somebody else who you don't trust to have access to your account information.
Another question that came in for registration: are my accounts covered in some way if there has been activity that's occurred not by us? We did kind of talk about this a couple times, but just to reiterate, within 24 hours, yes, you're 100% covered. We will get that money back. After 24 hours, we do our best, but there is no guarantee after the 24-hour period. So using tools like Positive Pay and ACH Positive Pay, monitoring your accounts daily, using those account alerts, those are really your best defense mechanisms. I believe there's another question. How likely is it that someone can access my mobile account info if I lose my phone? Good question. With modern technology on phones, with either face identification or a thumbprint, It's highly unlikely. Our app personally, this is just Community State Bank. But to log into your online banking, if you're trying to release funds from your app, it does require your password. It doesn't just allow for face recognition. So it's a pretty safe event, but odds are they're not going to get in your phone in the first place unless you leave it unlocked, and we don't recommend that.
And if that does happen, please contact the bank right away. We can lock out the access so we can ensure that if your phone gets in the wrong hands, that they can't do anything, and we can, I guess, delink the access to the mobile device. So we can make sure that that mobile function is disabled to help protect the account.
A common question that I get, it wasn't brought up here, but I'd like to touch on this too. Converting to ACH, right? So Molly talked about the safest and most efficient and cheapest way to conduct business with business to business is electronically. We used to hear a lot of my vendor doesn't want me to send funds electronically. My customer doesn't want me to pull funds from them electronically. It's become the norm. Everybody's used to it. That's becoming less and less of a reason not to convert over to ACH. Also, for the small businesses out there, think about your expense reimbursements. Expense reimbursements can be handled exactly the same as direct deposit. Make it electronic. That's just one less situation where a check is in the hands of somebody that could, be signing it over to somebody else or leaving it on a counter after they've done their mobile deposit. Handle as much as you can electronically. We've got a question here. Can you show us exactly what the mobile app looks like so we know which one to download? Yes, I think I could do that. It's CSB Simple. I doubt that I could show my phone on the screen because we've got the filters on here. It might not come through very good, but it is called CSB Simple. That's a Community State Bank mobile app for businesses, and it's simple banking for business. That's the right app to get from the App Store.
We did have another comment from one of our guests that says, I had a fraudulent email come through to attempt to change an employee's payroll direct deposit. I had him give me his new account information and then called the bank and reported that account as fraudulent. Does this make an impact to get additional information and report it? We are going to tell you yes. Anytime that somebody is going to give you that information, you're alerting that bank, whether it's us or another financial institution. You're giving us information that says, hey, we better keep an eye on this account. Now, we can't always give out information about accounts, but we can certainly note that within our institution and keep an eye out and shut down so that that person isn't taking more money from other people.
Allie, thank you for spotting me there on the mobile banking app, the business app. You can see it in your chat. Arlene, that should cover you. Another question came in internally. Are these fraud tools expensive? It depends bank to bank, obviously. But what I can tell you for Positive Pay and ACH Positive Pay, the total for those two products together is $35 per month. Now, the $35 per month doesn't even cover our cost, I believe, especially when you consider our efforts and maintenance, but it's worth doing. If you think of it as an insurance policy, it's probably the cheapest insurance that a business can buy. As far as online banking, account alerts, all the rest of the best practices that we shared, those are all at no cost at all. Questions? You're welcome, Arlene. All right, give another moment for any other questions that might be coming in? Seeing none, if there are questions that come after this, and likely that's going to happen, you're going to be thinking about the things that you've learned today, please feel free to reach out to one of our team members. We're happy to talk through this stuff because prevention is going to go so much further than trying to clean up a mess after it happens. Thank you for your time today. Really appreciate that you're here, and have a great day.